What's going on, everyone? It's me, Alone. I'm here to talk about Starfield Shattered Space. By the way, I know it's been a long time since I've uploaded. I will explain myself at the end of the video, talk about where I've been and what the future of this channel is. But I don't want to waste time on that at the beginning. You want me to jump straight into this review of Shattered Space, so let's do just that. Starfield Shattered Space was meant to be the first big piece of story content or DLC or expansion for Starfield, right? Yes, there's been many updates since launch. There's been new features and bug fixes and some story stuff in the form of creations, though a lot of you aren't on board with creations, but there has been some quests and missions in that regard. But when it comes to, let's call it proper DLC, a proper story expansion, Shattered Space was meant to be that, right? And unfortunately, in the eyes of many, it hasn't lived up to expectations. It is mostly negative on Steam right now. In terms of critic reviews, it is 58 on Metacritic. So the critical reception, at least when it comes to Shattered Space, hasn't been that good. I've played it, I've seen what others have to say about it, and I do want to share my thoughts because Starfield Shattered Space has, for the lack of a better phrase, broken me. I don't know how to feel about this DLC. I've been playing it pretty much every night since it came out. Because I have a job, it's been taking a little longer than normal, but I've been playing every night. And I just don't know what to think about it sometimes. Some nights, depending on the quest that I'm doing, I have a good time. And then other nights, I feel like I'm listening to countless lines of dialogue and doing fetch quests, and I don't like it. There's been so many mixed emotions and so many feelings that I've had that I really don't know how to review this thing. And keep in mind, I liked the base game of Starfield. I was relatively glowing. I thought I was pretty fair in my review of the base game. But overall, I did like it, and I do like Starfield. But Shattered Space, I don't know, man. It in a lot of areas, it wasn't working for me. And maybe it's because my overall opinions and thoughts on Starfield has molded since launch, since I've played other games and other RPGs in particular, and tried to step out of my regular Bethesda Game Studios wheelhouse. Maybe my overall impressions and opinions of Starfield aren't as strong as they were at launch, but still, I wasn't quote-unquote a hater. I wasn't someone that absolutely hated Starfield. I was looking forward to Shattered Space. Look at my Twitter account. I was really hyped and looking forward to it, especially because it was a new location, just one place we could explore. It finally touched on House Faroon, which we're missing in the main game. So I was looking forward to that. And at the end of it, after playing all the side quests and the main quest and exploring, I seriously don't know how to feel. I'm so bloody torn. So I just need to talk about positives and I need to talk about negatives. And then I'm going to try and make my mind up at the end of this thing. So in terms of positives, right? It's gorgeous. There is no denying that the city of Dazra and the planet where Shattered Space takes place on is absolutely gorgeous to look at. I've always been a huge fan of how Starfield looks. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I've always liked the way the game looks. I think the planets, for the most part, are really, really gorgeous and beautiful, but this planet takes it to a whole nother level. The use of color and the purples and the pinks and the reds and the blues, like gorgeous. I love the hues. I love the scenic views. The architecture of House Faroon, I love that more than anything else that I've seen in the base game. I thought they did a really, really good job with that. Some of the locations are just gorgeous, especially the way shrines. I just liked exploring and seeing these pretty buildings and these pretty pieces of architecture and just viewing the scenes and the landscape. It was very, very pretty. I never got tired of it, right? And as I touched on, it was nice to just have one planet to explore. That is one bit about Starfield that I have grown a bit tired of. And I think I mentioned it in my main review. There's a lot of trudging around in menus, right? It's just the way the game is. You're going from planet to planet to do stuff. You're in menus a lot. So it's nice to have one planet where there's a bunch of stuff where you don't need to be constantly in menus, right? It felt more like a BGS game of old in that regard. So for that reason, exploration, you have to say, was improved over the base game. Was exploration the greatest in the base game? Probably not in the eyes of many, but at least you can say it was better in Shattered Space, right? So that's the first big positive that I have. Secondly, it was nice to meet House Faroon, finally. You know, House Faroon was so clearly missing from the base game. There was even a trait related to House Faroon that was barely used because they were barely there. So it was nice that they actually told the story of House Faroon and brought them into the game, because they were sorely missing from the game, and I found them interesting, right? They were always this mystery, and I think Bethesda Game Studios made the right decision to make this the very first piece of DLC. There's still a part of me that suspects this was meant to be main game content, especially because of that trait, right? And especially because of how House Faroon had some sort of place in the main story. Part of me feels that they wanted to include this when the game came out, but they ran out of time and they decided to make it the first piece of DLC. But regardless, it was the correct decision. Dealing with House Faroon, going to their home planet, absolutely was the right call, and I appreciated that. That's not to say that I liked everything about House Faroon and the main story. I'll get to that in the negatives, but at least they made the right call there. It was also good to get some new weapons, some attire and spacesuits. There weren't that many, though. There weren't that many new weapons. I think there were like 6 or so new weapons overall. The thing that I was a little disappointed by is that there were no new shotguns, and I'm doing a shotguns build, so that was kind of a little disappointing. I ended up using my advanced Big Bang for the entirety of that DLC. It was doing so well, and I had no reason to change because no weapon that I picked up was a cool, new, unique shotgun, right? That was House Faroon themed. So that was disappointing, but at the very least, there are some new weapons, some new equipment and spacesuits and helmets and attire and whatnot. I know a lot of people were let down by the lack of the number of new things, but at least there was some new stuff there. And some of the side quests I enjoyed, all right? Some of them, not all of them. I will get into my thoughts about the other side quests. But I think a good number of the side quests I actually enjoyed, and there were some nice stories in there. And I'm not going to get into spoiler territory. I will vaguely describe things. House Divided with the investigation, I thought was interesting. I really liked Twice Reformed. I thought Twice Reformed was one of the better miscellaneous org side quests in Starfield. It had good dialogue, good voice acting with the guy that was involved, and an interesting story, and also an interesting way to conclude it. I really liked Twice Reformed, probably my favorite miscellaneous quest from the DLC, and probably even the base game, right? Or the whole game, I should say. Lost and Found and Fallen Footsteps, I'm not going to lie. The VO was getting to me a little bit at times, and I'll explain that in the negative section. But there was a bit where I genuinely teared up a little. It was very sad. And it had nice closure. If you go back at the end of it, there's actually closure to the story, which was great to see. And I saw that with a couple of the quest lines where you think you finish it and then you go back to the location and you see that final piece of closure depending upon the decisions that you made. It was really nice to see with these two little related quests. And yeah, I liked it. It did touch me, and I'm sure it did touch a lot of other people that have dealt with similar things with their family members. Not going to get into specifics, but I like those two quests. The Missing Groats was okay. Not my favorite, but as I mentioned, it had a nice ending if you picked a particular choice. There was closure in that regard, so I wanted to touch on that. And Sympathy for the Living was cool because it has some horror vibes to it. It was annoying because it was just another one of those quests where it's like, my family member's missing. There was so much of that, and I get it. Because of the main story, it made sense that a lot of people were missing, and they were asking you to go find this person that went missing. But there were a few quests, like part of the main story and the side quests, where this person went missing, can you go find them, right? To that effect. So even though I didn't like how it started, my throat just went. Even though I didn't like how it started, I liked the vibe of it when you got in there and the way the thing was. I don't want to spoil it, but I thought it was pretty cool. So those were, I would say, the positives of my experience of playing Shattered Space. But let's get to the negatives. The main quest was a downer. There's no denying it. There were some good aspects to it, but overall it felt way too short and not as grand as I hoped. Like, when you looked at the marketing material and the story that they were looking to tell with House Faroon or what happened to them and the mystery behind it, I was hoping for something much longer and grander, but overall it wasn't that. There were like 8 sub-quests, but 3 of them were helping like the house, so they would do something for you to further in the quest. And those little sub-quests, if you want to call them, were pretty much unrelated to actually furthering the main story, right? Again, it was like, find this person, we need this research. And it was like tangentially related, but not really. It was just about getting the houses on board so you could enter the Scaled Citadel. So it was like, you found this planet, 3 little quests to get the houses on board, enter the Scaled Citadel, you're done. That's what it felt like. And I was very, very much underwhelmed with that. And I thought it could have been longer. I thought it could have been grander. I wasn't expecting something between planets because, again, I liked the fact that it was all in one place. But really, it was about, let's get into the Scaled Citadel and we're pretty much done. It felt very, very, very short, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that. Also, as well, someone mentioned this on Reddit, and I agree, it was a little convenient that half the bloody city was missing. Yes, I get it. It was part of the story, right? It was part of the story that half the city was missing, and a lot of the people, a lot of the citizens of Dazra were missing. But it was convenient because that meant there weren't as many characters to talk to. It meant that it wasn't more of a city to explore. So it was a little tricky way for Bethesda Game Studios to, I don't know, make it smaller in scope, I guess. I was hoping for a little more, and I was worried about that. I think I said this in a previous video when I was looking at all the materials for Shattered Space. I was like, where are all the characters? It looks really empty. And of course, there were characters when we actually played the bloody thing. But yeah, there just weren't that many people to talk to because now we know of the story. They cut it all down. And a little convenient. There's also some choices in there. You can choose to be evil, which is nice, but I was still let down by it overall because it ended so quickly. So the main quest, I just wished it was longer. If it was longer, if there were another few more important points in there, like once you got to the Scaled Citadel, there was another aspect that took you to a different location, maybe that would have helped, but overall, I thought it was very, very short. Now, in terms of the other side quests, some of these weren't good, right? The duel with the two brothers, so much bloody talking. It was all talking. I grew tired of it. I just did not care about that little squabble, and I wanted to kill them both, right? So the duel wasn't good. Scientific method. I left this to the end because I saw some people have some negative opinions about it. Giant fetch quest. That's all it is. Didn't interest me whatsoever, and it didn't really have a conclusion to the bloody thing. So scientific method was one of the worst side quests in the game overall, but especially in Shattered Space. Was not a fan at all. The Courier and the Path of Redemption, boring as well. Path of Redemption was a little bit better, but again, lots of dialogue, and I'll get to the dialogue in a second. And it just was like going to the way shrines for the sake of going to the way shrines. It was a journey, I guess, but I wasn't a big fan. Legacy of the Fang was fine, but I was annoyed that you couldn't keep the bloody heirlooms at the end. Like, I thought, hey, you're picking up these cool bloody items, maybe I can keep them. All right, maybe I can use them and they're all powerful and everything. But no, I couldn't do that. And if there was an option to do that, maybe I missed it. But at the end, I couldn't. Like, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but I just couldn't keep the bloody things, and that really annoyed me. So those were the side quests. That was the main quest. Overall, in terms of content, we're talking about 13 to 15 hours that I played. I didn't explore absolutely every location, all right? Absolutely everything. I explored probably like 90 to 95% of it. So I probably could have gone a little bit longer, closer towards like 17, 18, 19, 20 hours. If you really explored every bloody location and looted, then it would be closer to that. But for what I played and the quests that I did and the exploration that I was happy to do, 13 to 15 hours was about the content that I got. And I'll conclude on whether I think that's appropriate for a price of $30 USD, but that was the content. House Faroon itself, as I said, I liked that it was about House Faroon. I liked that we got to finally understand the faction and talk to the bloody people and know what happened to them. But they weren't as weird and mysterious as I thought they were. Like, overall, they kind of just felt like another faction in the game, and I was a little let down. They felt like such an enigma in the base game. They felt so mysterious, but then meeting them, I was a little let down. We got this impression with Shattered Space that was meant to be this super weird and odd piece of DLC. And then it just didn't feel like that. It felt like more of Starfield. So that was a little bit of a letdown. Let's talk about the dialogue. I've touched on this a little bit. Now, I need to really preface this. I'm not saying that too much dialogue is bad, right? When it comes to RPGs, sure, the more the merrier. But I wasn't a fan of it. There was so much bloody dialogue. So much to the stage where I felt like it got unnecessary. Again, I don't mind games and especially RPGs that have a lot of dialogue, but some of the exposition was just going on and was unnecessary. And it felt like it was trying to pad out the story and the content in the DLC as much as possible. I wasn't a fan of the writing. Some stories were good, again, Twice Reformed. I definitely liked that one, right? That one was nice. Some of the other side quests were good, but overall, It was just, sometimes I just wanted them to hurry up. And maybe it was because when I was recording stuff, I wanted to make sure that I actually listened to everything and not just read the text and then skip at my own leisure. I wanted to make sure that I listened to everything, and maybe that's why it felt so long. But I still wasn't a fan of the writing. I thought there was too much dialogue. If the writing was better, then that level of dialogue would have been amazing. But it wasn't. I felt a lot of the exposition was unnecessary, so it didn't do it for me. And it probably didn't help that I wasn't really, like, I didn't find that many interesting characters in this DLC, so some of them I just didn't care about. Next up, Andreja. We need to talk about Andreja. I was super let down with her, man. I was hoping would have her Nick Valentine Far Harbor moment. She was House Faroon, and I was very surprised with, like, she talked, she had unique dialogue. You know, as you went through the quest, she would add commentary and whatnot. But oftentimes I thought, if there was Sarah or another person in her spot, 90% of the time you wouldn't tell, right? Like, she was just saying random stuff and you wouldn't know otherwise that she was in House Faroon unless you knew her story. Sometimes there were things that she said which made a lot of sense. There was one bit in the main quest where she talked to a character and you were able to convince him, and it was because she knew House Faroon and she was part of House Faroon that they made sense. But that was far and few between. Overall, what she was saying was just generic commentary, and it didn't make sense because she was meant to be a House Faroon in a past life. I was really let down with Andreja's dialogue. The whole reason I brought her along with me was because I thought she would have an active involvement, or a more active involvement, in the main story, in the side quests, and say some useful things that were very, very specific and relevant to her time being in House Faroon. But there wasn't a lot of that, right? Looting, all right? I said I like exploration because I liked a lot of the scenes and the buildings and whatnot. But looting definitely feels lackluster. And this is probably related to a problem in the base game. But I just kept finding pointless legendary melee weapons. Constantly. Every legendary that I found was a melee. And it's a problem in the base game. It was still a problem in Starfield Shattered Space. I was hoping to find more. Oftentimes, it's not even worth spending doing all this looting in every location and spending minutes digi-picking to open up a container that just has ammo, right? And nothing of value. Like, it doesn't feel as satisfying as previous Bethesda Game Studios games where you would spend the time looting because you know you'll find something useful. And this is especially pervasive because you know it all means nothing when you go to New Game Plus anyways, because you lose everything. And it's really affected my perception of how useful looting is in Starfield, to the stage where I just barely bother with it anymore. I barely try. Don't get me wrong, I'll pick up, you know, legendary weapons or whatever when I find them, but you don't find often the ones that are useful for you. They're mostly melee weapons. And I feel like whether it's a bug or the ratios are just off, looting does not feel satisfactory, right? And I will say this, I bloody miss unique weapons. I was hoping that with some of these quest lines, you got a unique weapon. Do you remember the days of Fallout 3 where you would complete a quest line and you would get a unique variant of a base weapon, and it was the best feeling in the world? It didn't even need to look different. It just needed to have better stats and a unique name. And I was like, yes, I'm so glad I did this quest. I'm so glad I explored this location, because that made it worth it. The fact that there's none of that in Starfield as a whole, but also, of course, Shattered Space, it lets me down. It makes me not want to do some of these quests, especially when you get to level 80 and 90, and the experience that you're getting from these quest lines aren't moving the needle whatsoever, and some of the number of credits that you're getting aren't worth it in the end. So I think the rewards need to be improved, and I think unique weapons are a way to do that, but that's just not the way the base game works. There were also some new enemies, but not that many, right? And obviously a big portion of them were just humans in vortex form that teleported, and the teleporting was very, very annoying. And there's obviously no new ship parts and no ships that are related to House Faroon and stuff like that. I know people were complaining about it, but those I would say are the negatives that I have for Starfield Shattered Space. So overall, if you don't like Starfield, Shattered Space is not changing your opinion. If you liked Starfield and you liked the base game, this gives you more of that, and I think, you know, you'll have a good time. I thought the DLC was fine. Is it worth $30 USD? Effectively, what is half the price of the base game? Probably not. But we know the pricing has been out of whack. Like, creations are very expensive. So I'm not necessarily surprised by a $30 USD price tag for Shattered Space. But with the amount of content that you get, 13 to 15 hours, I don't know if the value is quite there, right? But as I said, like if you don't like Starfield, it's not going to change your mind. And I was hoping for a little bit more. I liked some side quests. I was let down by the main quest. I'm torn. As you can see, I keep going back and forth, and I'm really trying my best to be fair here, but it's hard. Overall, for me personally, it was fine. And would I replay it? Probably not. I was just hoping for a little bit more in some areas, and in other areas, it's what I expected, and in some other areas, I liked it. It's hard to say, man. So those are my thoughts about Starfield Shattered Space. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But I do want to spend the end of this video talking about where I've been. So I obviously haven't been uploading in a while. It's been probably over a month since my last video, which happened to be a Starfield video, and even longer before that one. The reason is because there's some family stuff going on that I don't want to talk about publicly right now. But also as well, I did get a new job. A job offer came along. It's again in games, and I didn't want to turn it down. I couldn't turn it down because it was like I was looking forward to it. I was looking forward to be able to be back in games. My last job wasn't in games. I was there for 2 years, and I wanted to try my hand at being in the games industry once again. So I'm working at Bethesda Studios as their global communications manager. And the reason why I haven't been uploading is because obviously I'm at work every day, and we were just in a very busy period launching a game called Kill Knight. Kill Knight is a top-down isometric twin-stick shooter, and part of me has been lost to it because you need to play the game to be able to work on it, right? And I'm only very new to the company, so I've been playing so much bloody Kill Knight, and I got addicted to it for a little bit. It's very, very fun. It's not typically my wheelhouse to play these kind of top-down isometric twin-stick shooters, but I got hooked, man. And it's difficult, but in a good way. It challenges you. I've been playing that, and obviously doing my job when it comes to that, working with content creators and whatnot on the PR side and the comm side. So I've been playing Kill Knight. I've been helping launch Kill Knight. That's been a good part of my life for the past month. By the way, obviously this is necessarily a sponsored segment. It's my job. But I would recommend, if that sounds like your vibe when it comes to the game, go check out Kill Knight. It's out now everywhere, right? Steam, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, and whatnot. So because of that, and because I have this job, I haven't been able to upload much. And in the future, that's unfortunately not going to be able to change too much. It's going to be more infrequent now when it comes to uploads. Now that we're past this busy period, I will be able to upload a little more, hence this video. But I'm hoping maybe on average, like, I want to say 1 video a week. The Shattered Space review has taken longer because I had to play the bloody thing for 15 hours and then make the video. But I'm hoping that if I'm just covering a piece of news or doing a discussion, I can realistically aim for something like once a week, right? And I'm still doing the MM Arcade podcast with Rob Whitaker, where we talk about MMA stuff and video games as well. That's literally half of the podcast, and it's more generic kind of video game stuff. So if you're interested in that, I'll leave a link in the comments below. I've always wanted to do podcasting, and the podcast is so much bloody fun, man. But yeah, so overall, that's what I'm going to try and aim for while I have this job, and we'll see how it goes. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.